Invasion into Ukraine, India's worst fears came true. This is when a 21-year-old Indian medical student in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, near the Russian border, was killed on Tuesday. This marks the country's first casualty in the war. Now, Prime Minister Modi, the Karnataka Chief Minister Bommai, they both offered their condolences to the family of the 21-year-old. The government has also called on the ambassadors of Russia and Ukraine to reiterate India's demand for the safe passage of Indian nationals who are still very much in conflict zones as we speak. More than 2,000 Indians have been brought back so far, but a huge number of Indians still remain. You remember the original number of that Indian community in Ukraine was given at about 20,000 students.
Evacuation from Kharkiv is now our top priority. 12,000 approximately have since left Ukraine, which is 60% of the total number of our citizens in Ukraine. We have no more nationals left in Kyiv. Nobody has contacted us from Kyiv since. All our inquiries have revealed that each and every of our nationals have come out of Kyiv to the extent that we can tell you.
Your media informed to our senior officials, embassy, Prime Minister to bring back my son's dead body. Okay. And also I request to all these political leaders kindly look into the matter and see that donation is very bad, and all these intelligent students, they are going to study in abroad. They think that education here, if they plan to get that education here, they have to pay crores to get that seat. And the same education, better than this, they are getting very good education in abroad, and all this practical equipment also very standard. Here in India, only that cost-wise, they are allotting the seat, because my son has got 97% in the PUC.
This could be the blast that defines President Putin's invasion. Abandoning all pretense, a desperate Russian resort to shelling civilian areas in Kharkiv. In a matter of seconds, the city's iconic town square reduced to dust. But the death and destruction in Kharkiv has hit home as well. 21-year-old Naveen Shekharappa from Karnataka killed in this wanton shelling that the city saw.
SG Naveen was a fourth-year medical student at the Kharkiv University. All these days, ever since the war has been playing out between Ukraine and Russia, he'd been living in a bunker which is underneath his flat. This morning, he had stepped out to buy food as he and his flatmates were running out of essential supplies. This is when, in the morning, heavy Russian shelling starts. It manages to completely decimate the town square. It is in this shelling that Naveen is killed as well. A Ukrainian passerby spots Naveen's body next. He sees a phone lying next to him and dials the first number on that phone. That number was of Naveen's flatmate, and that is how Naveen's friends and flatmates in Kharkiv got to know that he had become the first Indian casualty in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Thereafter, his family was informed.
Back home, and especially in Naveen's district of Haveri, there's shock over how quickly he was taken away.
ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಯಾರೋ ಫೋನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ನಮಗೆ ಡಿಸ್ಟರ್ಬ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಪಾಪ ಅವ್ರು ತುಂಬಾ ದುಃಖದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಏನ್ ಪಟ್ಟಿವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಆ ಹುಡುಗನ ಫೋನ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಆ ಹುಡುಗನ ಫೋನ್ ನಂಬರ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದಾನೆ ಫೋನ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಯಾರೋ ಒಬ್ರು ತಗೊಂಡು ಈ ತರ ಡೆಡ್
ಅವರ ತಂದೆಯ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಾನು ಮಾತನಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ನನಗೆ ಭಾಳ ಬೇಕಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕುಟುಂಬ. ವಿ ರಿಕವರ್ ದಿ ಬಾಡಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ವಾರ್ ಝೋನ್ ಇದೆ. ವಾರ್ ಝೋನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇದೆ, ಏನಿದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಇನ್ನೂ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ.
But while Naveen's family mourns, the government cannot afford to do so, at least just yet. Because there are thousands of youngsters like Naveen, mostly medical students, still stranded in Ukraine, in cities like Kharkiv, Kyiv and Sumy, without food or essential supplies.
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೆಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಯಾವುದೇ ಎವಾಕ್ಯುಯೇಷನ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಯಾವುದು ಮೆಸೇಜು ಬರತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗೆ ನಮ್ಮದು ಫುಡ್ ಶಾರ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಂತೂ ಭಾಳ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ನೀರು ಶಾರ್ಟೇಜ್ ಭಾಳ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಮಾರ್ಕೆಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ, ಕರ್ಫ್ಯೂ ಆಗಿದೆ.
While on one hand, India is celebrating the return of each national who comes through Operation Ganga, Naveen's tragic demise comes across as a timely warning that every Indian life lost is a battle lost. With Ritanshu Bhattacharya in New Delhi, I'm Shreya Dhondiyal.
There are still more than 10,000 Indian students stuck in Ukraine. We'll continue to cover their rescue efforts as we speak. But just a few minutes ago, ExxonMobil, Shell and BP, they've all announced that they'll be discontinuing operations in Russia and that they'll be ending further investments there. More updates on that front. Right now, it's time for a short break.
And they have been going through unimaginable waiting times. In fact, let me just show you what I mean, because the line here, and we've been here since last night, has not moved at all. And if we just go and ask most of the people in this line how long they have been waiting out here for, keeping in mind that these temperatures go below freezing. I'm sorry, can I ask you all, how long have you been waiting here now?
From last 6 days.
6 days.
Yeah. From 7 a.m.
And how long have you been waiting here?
More than a week. How long time?
Since it began, 4 days.
No, more. 5.
I mean, and the line here isn't moving at all. And a lot of these young men, when they try to get on the trains or the buses, they're told that they can't do that. They're actually having to walk to get here, and it takes hours. And as I was saying, the temperatures are freezing cold. On the other side of this street here, you have the line for Ukrainians. And for those who are mostly women and children, and looking over on this side is just as heartbreaking because everybody in that line is either there without their husband, father, or brother because they have to stay behind, or they have come with them and they're waiting these last final hours together before they have to say goodbye. We were speaking earlier to a couple. He is from Ukraine, she is from Vietnam. They have 2 little children, and he had walked them all the way up to try to get them out. We met a family from Afghanistan. I mean, just think about that. They had fled Afghanistan. They came here. They have a 5-day-old baby. They just made it across only to be told because the baby doesn't have a birth certificate, they will not be able to cross. What everyone here will tell you, though, is that this system needs to be addressed. It needs to be quicker. It needs to be faster. These people have all suffered so much. They really cannot psychologically go through anymore.
So the president of the European Commission actually said just a couple days ago, we believe that Ukraine is one of us. We want them to join the European Union. However, it is not something that can happen overnight. It's a very complex process. It has to do with market integration. There are a number of steps, including democracy and democracy reform and anti-corruption efforts that would have to take place first. And of course, there's a war going on now in Ukraine, and there are separatist regions that have broken away from Ukraine and are now supported by Russia. So there are a number of obstacles here. President Zelenskyy did sign a formal application earlier this week for EU membership and has been pushing that a lot in recent days because, of course, he believes that it will give his country certain security guarantees, move him closer to the West, and show Russia that Ukraine is a European state that has the support of the entire European Union and the West. But this is not something that is going to happen quickly, even for a country that is not currently at war. It is a complex process. So they
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. Now, just a few hours ago, Russia actually warned residents of Ukraine that it was preparing to hit targets in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Just a few hours after that warning, it attacked a TV tower in Kyiv. That was at that point Kyiv's tallest structure. It killed 5 people. My colleague Anand Narsimhan brings you this ground report about how Russian troops are making their way into the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. He also tells you a little bit about the arrangements and about efforts to rescue refugees from the capital. Take a look.
This is the Russian strategy. They're going to up the ante, pull the might, use all their might. What they thought will be done in 4 days, they have to wrap it up in the next 24 hours, ladies and gentlemen. 24 to 36 hours max before the world moves in with its resources, and Russia will then find itself in a position of disadvantage. I'm just talking it for saying from the Russia's point of view, Vladimir Putin's point of view. 3 sides is where the attack has been mounted. They want to secure Black Sea, want direct access to the Black Sea. They have the Sea of Azov. They have control over Crimea, but control into the mainland is not there. This is controlled. This zone is controlled by separatists. This is not Russia. Russia is here. And if Vladimir Putin is able to do this, sealing this off, or go right down the Dnipro, this side altogether, seal it off and take control. That's what he's wanting to do. But look at the ingress that Russia has made, especially around Kyiv, entering via Belarus, entering from Russia. This is Kharkiv. They want control of Kharkiv, the second largest city, and Kyiv. They will then want to seal this whole area off. They would want to cut this off and then also draw this line and unite Crimea with Luhansk and Donetsk. So these will be the provinces. Mariupol also seeing intense fighting. Kherson seeing intense fighting. Odessa here seeing intense fighting. This is what is Vladimir Putin's target. Around the Dnipro or the Dnieper, the West is not his concern. This portion is his concern, and that's where he's trying to build up. There is a 40-mile convoy, 40-mile convoy made up of hundreds of tanks headed towards Kyiv. That is the intensity of the attack, that assault that Vladimir Putin is mounting. It's just started for him, and he doesn't care about the sanctions. It doesn't matter. Head of the convoy at Hostomel, just 15 miles from Kyiv. 15 miles. So they're closing in, and they will swoop in, and they will want to take control, because that's when they have the upper hand. Resistance, pushing them back, and if Kyiv holds and if Kharkiv holds, then it's disadvantage Putin in the next 24 to 36 hours. Russian forces attempting to encircle the city, Russian forces operating west of Sumy, and they are also advancing towards Kyiv. I showed you northward down. You can see it in the map there. They're coming down, and that's what they will also encircle and join that convoy which is coming in from Belarus. Fresh Russian bombardment causing large explosions, and the bombardments are happening pan-Ukraine. The bombardments are happening pan-Ukraine so that they can target the bases. No aircraft can come in. The Ukraine borders are sealed. So how is international aid going to come into Ukraine is the biggest question, because no aircraft, no military aircraft can land on any of the bases, because they have gone ahead and bombed those establishments. And in Kharkiv, eastern Ukraine, certain cities, they are very clearly even bombing down administrative buildings. That's what Russians are doing. The UN says nearly 5 lakh people have left Ukraine. Just let's have a look at where they have gone, and this is the information that we've got. Nearly 1,60,000 families have been displaced. They are now rendered homeless. Their homes have been destroyed. Belarus, 500 people have gone towards Belarus. Let's look at Poland, 2,81,000. So the maximum number have actually moved towards Poland, and Poland is facing immense pressure there because of the number of people knocking on its doors. Slovakia, 30,000 people. Again, an Indian aircraft has come from bringing back Indians from Slovakia. Hungary, 84,000. So first flight from Budapest will land around 7:20 a.m. tomorrow morning. In Delhi, 32,000 towards Romania. There are also those who have moved to Russia and Moldova, 36,000 in Moldova, and then those who have already moved towards Russia. 1,29,000 people have moved to Russia. 34,000 have also moved to other EU nations. So this is the kind of exodus that we are seeing from Ukraine, given the kind of crisis that we are seeing. Overall, nearly 4,99,000. That number has actually gone up more than 5 lakh as we speak. But one of the aspects is 9,000 Indians are out of Ukraine. 9,000 Indians are out of Ukraine. They are waiting to be evacuated. Slowly, that number should only inch up as more and more flights start operating from the neighboring countries. Ukraine is getting some help. Ukraine is being armed. Now, we just give you the update of the Netherlands. USA has said that they are going to send across shoulder-fired Javelin missiles. Anti-armored, anti-aircraft munitions are also going to be sent. Germany is going to send 1,000 anti-tank weapons, 500 Stinger defense systems. Netherlands, 50 anti-tank weapons have already reached. The 200 Stinger rockets have already reached. That's the update. Czech Republic, 3,000 machine guns, 7,000 assault rifles. Finland, 2,500 assault weapons, 1,500 anti-tank weapons. It all looks very much, but against the might of Russia, is this enough? That's a big question. Belgium, 2,000 machine guns, 3,800 tons of fuel. The European Union is going to send 70 MiG-29s and Sukhoi 25 fighter jets. So Russian-made aircrafts are going to be ploughed against in the fight against Russia itself. But where are these jets going to land? Are there any airstrips left? Big question. Jets from Bulgaria, Poland, Slovakia, all of this is going to come in. But all of this put together, does this equal the might of what Vladimir Putin has decided to unleash? This is about 30 to 40%. That's what he's pressed so far of his military might.
US President Joe Biden is, as we speak, delivering the US State of the Union address. We're going to cut live to CNN to bring you more updates. All eyes are on that, obviously, with developments taking place in Ukraine right now.
He will be the chairman of Ways and Means, oh, he's retiring, okay. But then also Mike McCall, who would be, theoretically, if the Republicans win in the fall, the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, an important ally for him to have. There he is saying hello to Breyer, saying hello to Elena Kagan. There's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley. Really quite a striking sight that so few individuals in the chamber are wearing masks. And the mask rule in the House was just lifted. One might suspect for this very moment, Dana, not to be skeptic.
And well, it was just lifted in D.C. today as well.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, General. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Please. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, members of Congress and the Cabinet, Justice of the Supreme Court, my fellow Americans. Last year, COVID-19 kept us apart. This year, we're finally together again. Tonight, we meet as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, but most importantly, as Americans, with the duty to one another, to America, to the American people, to the Constitution, and an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny. Thank you. 6 days ago, Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. And President Zelenskyy, to every Ukrainian, their fearlessness, their courage, their determination literally inspires the world. Groups of citizens blocking tanks with their bodies, everyone from students to retirees to teachers, turned soldiers defending their homeland. And in this struggle, President Zelenskyy said in his speech to the European Parliament, "Light will win over darkness." The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is here tonight, sitting with the First Lady. Let each of us, if you're able to stand and send an unmistakable signal to the world of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She's bright, she's strong, and she's resolved. Yes, we, the United States of America, stand with the Ukrainian people. Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause. And the cost, the threats to America and America to the world keeps rising. That's why the NATO alliance was created, to secure peace and stability in Europe after World War II. The United States is a member, along with 29 other nations. It matters. American diplomacy matters. American resolve matters. Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was premeditated and totally unprovoked. He rejected repeated efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united, and that's what we did. We stayed united. We prepared extensively and carefully. We spent months building coalitions of other freedom-loving nations in Europe and the Americas, from America to the Asian and African continents, to confront Putin. Like many of you, I spent countless hours unifying our European allies. We shared with the world in advance what we knew Putin was planning and precisely how we would try to falsify and justify his aggression. We countered Russia's lies with the truth. And now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others. Even Switzerland are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. To technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who bilk billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for your ill-begotten gains. And tonight, I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding additional squeeze on their economy. He has no idea what's coming. The ruble has already lost 30% of its value. The Russian stock market has lost 40% of its value, and trading remains suspended. The Russian economy is reeling, and Putin alone is the one to blame. Together with our allies, we're providing support to the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. Military assistance, economic assistance, humanitarian assistance. We're giving more than $1 billion of direct assistance to Ukraine, and will continue to aid the Ukrainian people as they defend their country and help ease their suffering. But let me be clear, our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. For that purpose, we have mobilized American ground forces, air squadrons, ship deployments to protect NATO countries including Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And as I've made crystal clear, the United States and our allies will defend every inch of territory that is NATO territory with the full force of our collective power. Every single inch. And we're clear-eyed. The Ukrainians are fighting back with pure courage. But the next few days, weeks, and months will be hard on them. Putin has unleashed violence and chaos, but while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run. And a pound of Ukrainian people, the proud, proud people, pound for pound, ready to fight with every inch of energy they have. They've known 30 years of independence, have repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. To all Americans, I'll be honest with you, as I always promised I would be. A Russian dictator invading a foreign country has cost around the world. And I'm taking robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy, and that we use every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers. Tonight, I can announce the United States has worked with 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. America will lead that effort, releasing 30 million barrels of our own strategic petroleum reserve. And we stand ready to do more if necessary, united with our allies. These steps will help blunt gas prices here at home, but I know news about what's happening can seem alarming to all Americans. But I want you to know, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. When the history of this era is written, Putin's war in Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. While it shouldn't have taken something so terrible for people around the world to see what's at stake, now everyone sees it clearly. We see the unity among leaders of nations, a more unified Europe, a more unified West. We see unity among the people who are gathering in cities and large crowds around the world, even in Russia, to demonstrate their support for the people of Ukraine. In the battle between democracy and autocracies, democracies are rising to the moment, and the world is clearly choosing the side of peace and security. This is the real test, and it's going to take time. So let us continue to draw inspiration from the iron will of the Ukrainian people. To our fellow Ukrainian Americans who forged the deep bond that connects our two nations, we stand with you. we stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom, and he will never weaken the resolve of the free world. We meet tonight in an America that has lived through two of the hardest years this nation has ever faced. The pandemic has been punishing, and so many families are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of food, gas, housing, and so much more. I understand, like many of you did. My dad had to leave his home in Scranton, Pennsylvania to find work. So like many of you, I grew up in a family when the price of food went up, it was felt throughout the family. It had an impact. That's when one of the first things I did as president was fight to pass the American Rescue Plan. Because people were hurting, we needed to act, and we did. Few pieces of legislation have done more at a critical moment in our history to lift us out of a crisis. It fueled our efforts to vaccinate the nation and combat COVID-19, delivered immediate economic relief to tens of millions of Americans. It helped put food on the table. Remember those long lines of cars waiting for hours just to get a box of food put in their trunk. It cut the cost of health care insurance. And as my dad used to say, it gave the people just a little bit of breathing room. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind. Folks, and it worked. It worked. It worked. We created jobs, lots of jobs. In fact, our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year. More jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America. The economy grew at a rate of 5.7 last year, the strongest growth rate in 40 years. And the first step in bringing fundamental change to our economy that hasn't worked for working people in this nation for too long. For the past 40 years, we were told that tax break for those at the top and benefits would trickle down and everyone would benefit. But that trickle-down theory led to a weaker economic growth, lower wages, bigger deficits, and a widening gap between the top and everyone else in nearly a century.
Quickly, even for a country that is not currently at war. It is a complex process. So they are reviewing that application for expedited candidacy for Ukraine, but it remains to be seen how and when and even if that's ever going to happen.
You can hear behind me now the air raid sirens are starting up once again. We've already heard them a couple of times today. And the fear, as Volodymyr Zelenskyy put it in an address today to the people of Ukraine, is that the real focus now is on Ukraine's two main cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv. And he said, Kyiv and Kharkiv are the most important targets for Russia. Terror is meant to break us, to break our resistance. And he went on to say that Kyiv is special. This is the heart of the country, and it must keep beating. Now, for now, there hasn't been a blanket curfew put in place. People are still able to go out, but they're only really going out, Brianna and John, to try to buy supplies, to try to get groceries, batteries, things of this nature, because as we see this massive column of Russian armory and hardware bearing down on the capital, the very real fear is that this city will soon be completely encircled and that it will be extremely difficult to move supplies, to move food, to move humanitarian assistance in and out. And one more thing I want to mention, because it also sent a shiver down my spine, the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu accusing the Ukrainian military once again today of using civilian infrastructure as a shield for military hardware. This is the kind of propaganda we have heard from the Russians many times before, and unfortunately, it is usually a precursor to attacking or hitting civilian targets under the guise that they're being used to protect military hardware.
As you can imagine, in fact, all of these stories are absolutely heartbreaking. And among these horrendous stories of fear and of bombs falling, you also have a segment of the population that was living in Ukraine who are students, who are foreign nationals, and they have been going through unimaginable waiting times. In fact, let me just show you what I mean, because the line here, and we've been here since last night, has not moved at all. And if we just go and ask most of the people in this line how long they have been waiting out here for, keeping in mind that these temperatures
Hello and welcome. You're watching the morning news. My name is Toya Singh. Our focus remains very much on Ukraine through the rest of the day. Just a few minutes ago, the State of the Union from President Joe Biden, that and more here on the show.
This is the price of freedom. We're fighting.
So you can see they're collecting things to donate to people, sleeping bags, sleeping mats, pickles, foods.
I, Mahasuditi, will be joining you from Poland with all the details of how this massive exercise is being conducted on the Polish border.
All right, let's take you first to the ground in Ukraine and also bring you updates, of course, from the talks in Washington. Now, even as another round of talks are set to be held today, Ukraine's capital of Kyiv continues to face a barrage of military assaults from Russian troops. In his first State of the Union address, US President Joe Biden, this was just a few minutes ago, he reiterated his support for Ukraine, but made it clear US troops will not be joining the fight on the ground. He spent the first 20 minutes of his State of the Union, a speech that's usually meant to update the American public on the state of the economy. He spent the first 20 minutes devoted very much to the issue of Ukraine. He also said that the US will be imposing wider sanctions, including a complete ban of flights from Russia in American airspace. Meanwhile, speaking exclusively to CNN's Matthew Chance, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he has been called valiant in the last few days. He has said he's adamant that the fight against Russia can be won, but not alone. He's calling for global leaders to ramp up action against Putin. Zelenskyy is batting for a second round of dialogue with Russia to restore peace. That dialogue is actually expected to take place today.
What message? So many messages. I think that he has to give those messages what will really work. That is very important to be very, useful in this situation, in this war against Russia.
I think, first of all, he's a world leader, and it's very important for people in the United States to understand that despite the fact that the war is taking place in Ukraine, it's essentially for values in life, for democracy, for freedom. Therefore, this war is for all the world. And that message should be sent far and wide, from Ukraine to people in the United States, so they understand what it is like for us here, what we're fighting for, and why support for Ukraine matters.
For a long time, you downplayed the US intelligence assessments about there being an imminent Russian attack. Do you now regret that? And do you think the fact that you didn't act earlier has left the people of Ukraine unprepared?
The response you see today, how we work, how our army works and defends us, is a testament that we're ready for anything. Even though we were preparing in advance, it's important not to let your enemy anticipate your reaction. That's why I really did not like that situation where we put everything at risk and tell the world that we're preparing for war.
The United States has said that it will not enforce a no-fly zone over this country, and it won't put boots on the ground. But do you think it is now time for President Biden and other Western countries to reconsider that and to help you, not just with military aid, but with manpower?
I've already turned to some foreign leaders with this request. I believe that leaders must support democratic states of the world who are keen to defend such principles. The powerful issue of closing the airspace helps us tremendously. This does not mean dragging NATO into this war. We spoke many times with President Biden, and I'm thankful for him for these opportunities and support, but they also did not hear me. I've been telling them that Ukraine will fight hardest of all. You will see, but us alone against Russia, we would not be able to do it.
Your army has enjoyed some significant battlefield victories in the past week. I myself have been to see some of the Russian armoured columns that have been totally hammered and destroyed by the weapons and the men that you've got fighting the Russian advance. Are you now concerned, though, that the Kremlin will double down on its military operations and hit Ukraine even harder?
Firstly, why are we winning, or why are we defending ourselves? Because this is our home. Yes, Russia will double up, but take a look at them. Why our men are stronger, more powerful and successful? Because, as I said, we have what we need to protect. And they do not even understand our state. They do not know these streets. They do not know our people, do not understand our philosophy, our aspirations, what type of people we are. They don't know anything here. They were just sent here to fight and to die.
You sent your delegation to meet the Russians for talks.
Yeah.
Did anything substantial come out of that? Is there any hope as the world watches for diplomacy?
They decided to begin to speak about this situation. And I really wanted, and I asked them, so you have to speak, first of all, everybody has to stop fighting and to go to that point from where it was beginning. Yes, it began 6 days ago. Yes. I think there are principal things you can do it, and that is very important moment. If you'll do this, and if those side is ready, it means that they are ready for the peace. If they don't ready, it means that you're just, wasting time.
And do you think you're wasting your time, or do you think they're ready?
We'll see.
Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. They keep moving, and the cost, the threats to America and America to the world keeps rising. That's why the NATO alliance was created, to secure peace and stability in Europe after World War II. The United States is a member, along with 29 other nations. It matters. American diplomacy matters. American resolve matters. Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was premeditated and totally unprovoked. He rejected repeated efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united, and that's what we did. We stayed united. We prepared extensively and carefully. We spent months building coalitions of other freedom-loving nations in Europe and the Americas, from America to the Asian and African continents, to confront Putin. Like many of you, I spent countless hours unifying our European allies. We shared with the world in advance what we knew Putin was planning and precisely how he would try to falsify and justify his aggression. We countered Russia's lies with the truth. And now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, even Switzerland, are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been.
All right, let's bring you the update from the ground as we speak and as we wait right now in Kyiv. What we already know right now, and this has been true of the last few hours, a 40-mile convoy has actually been headed over to Kyiv. It's made up of hundreds of tanks headed towards Kyiv, but that very same convoy has for hours now been outside Kyiv. It hasn't been moving. US military intel is suggesting that it could either be refueling, it could be waiting on something. So that does remain unclear why that convoy is wasted there. Now, the head of the convoy is at Hostomel. It's just 15 miles away from the center of Kyiv. So this structure is waiting there. It was caught, as we've just said, on a number of cameras heading there. It is stationed outside the city as we speak. Now, Russian forces are attempting, as we've just said, to, and as you can see over here, to encircle the entire city of Kyiv. That is there right now, though they are stationed outside. Now, we'd like to remind our audiences, they had also said that they are going to start hitting the inside of Kyiv, and we've already seen that immediately after they gave that warning. We saw the TV tower in Kyiv, the tallest building in Kyiv, actually proceed to get attacked. These are all updates from yesterday. The war is now entering another day in Kyiv. Keep in mind that in Kyiv, it is about 3.5 hours behind the time it is in India. So early in the morning right now of a new day of fighting for people in Ukraine. So those are the most recent updates. As you can see around the capital of Kyiv right now, fighting continues for another day in Kyiv, and fresh Russian bombardments have been taking place. As we just said, it's been causing large explosions in Kyiv and different parts of Kyiv. Kyiv and Kharkiv. Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine. These are both the cities that over the last few days have been the focus of attack. Kyiv is, of course, right on top of the list of Russian priorities right now. It's the capital. The Ukrainian president is focused over there along with his family. He has already said that he remains the Russians' #1 target. Now, we actually have two guests with us this morning to bring us a lot more context on this story. Good morning to both of you. I'm going to just give our audiences a light introduction. On the top, we have Ashok Sajjanar. He's a former diplomat. He's with us. We also have Alok Bansal, the director of the India Foundation. Good morning to both of you. Mr. Sajjanar, I want to come over to you first. So just a few minutes ago, for our audiences, we played out US President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. And he spent, almost the first 20 minutes of that State of the Union address talking about and addressing Ukraine. Now, critics will talk about perhaps that being an effort to distract from the American economy problems. America is facing some of the highest inflation it's seen. But I just want to ask you, in that speech that he gave, one of the things he talked about was the shutting down of American airspace to Russian flights. I want to ask you, this is another sanction coming in. These extra sanctions we're seeing coming in the last few hours, are these at all a surprise for Russia? Are there just more sanctions planned in the next few days till we see some kind of abatement of military action?
Yes, thank you very much and good morning to you. I think over the last few days, from the 24th onwards when the attack, when the invasion started, we have seen sanctions being imposed virtually every day from all members of the Western Alliance. And not only the Western Alliance, I think from Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, etc. So there has been a ramping up of sanctions from all over. And as President Biden just now said, even countries, neutral countries like Switzerland have also joined in. So I would imagine that there would be ramping up of sanctions will continue for the next few days. Now, as far as your question whether Mr. Putin expected these sort of sanctions, of course he would have known that there would be sanctions coming, and he tried to insulate himself and to get this arsenal, financial arsenal of about $640 billion in reserves, so that he could weather this storm and weather all these sanctions. But possibly it appears that, Mr. Putin erred on the fact that he would meet such stiff resistance on the ground from the Ukrainian forces and also the Ukrainian people, that they would come, and this would, Mr. Zelenskyy would be able to galvanize the whole country to stand up against Russia. I think that was a miscalculation. He possibly thought that, with the small task force that he sent in the beginning, he would be able to steamroll. That has not happened. And the second is also on the extent of sanctions, because possibly he miscalculated on the fact that there is interdependence between Russia and Europe, Russia and the world, particularly as far as its energy exports are concerned, its gas exports, oil exports, coal, so many other things. And he thought that it would be mutual pain if this pain was inflicted on Russia. The other side, other parties would also have to face the pain, feel the pain, and they might not be prepared for this. But here also he seems to have miscalculated, because I think the sort of sanctions and the ramping up and the increasing severity and depth and the increase in the spectrum of sanctions, that has been growing, and that must have taken Mr. Putin quite by surprise. We've seen the central bank being sanctioned. You just now mentioned about the airspace, and yes, that is also, because now if it starts biting the individuals, Putin himself has been sanctioned, Lavrov, all the oligarchs, I think this is going to have an impact on the top leadership. And of course, the people are suffering because the ruble has taken a huge hit, and we've seen this serpentine queues in front of ATMs in Russia, because everyone wants to get money out, everyone wants to get their reserves, so to say, their savings in dollars or in hard currency. And ruble is becoming increasingly worthless currency. So I think this would be a cause for great worry, but of course we'll have to see how much China is willing to step in, because if they are able to conduct their trade in Chinese yuan or in even in blockchain currencies, we'll have to see how things shape up in the coming days and weeks.
Mr. Sajana, that, where you've left it right now is actually where I want to take the question to Alok right now, who's with us. Mr. Bansal, Mr. Sajana just talked about possibly China stepping in and helping out here. Could you tell our audiences a little bit about what that could look like? But the second question I also wanted to ask you was, obviously, there's some hopes that a second round of talks may also take place today between Ukraine and Russia. For our audiences, tell us what could have changed between that first talk and the second talk, for us to expect any kind of different outcome, because the first one, neither side left with a concrete outcome. What could change?
See, when the first talks happened, nobody expected an outcome immediately. Right. In fact, first talks was de facto to prepare ground for another round of talks subsequently, and that is what is happening now. So the second round is far more important than the first round, because in first round, the two countries were talking in the midst of a war, which itself was a great thing. And I think the first round of talks, the two countries were gauging each other's position. And I think we need to understand that talks are important at this point of time for both countries. Ukraine definitely wants a ceasefire, but more significantly, even Putin at this stage is having a problem, because the way he had expected that the war would go has not gone. And the Ukrainians, after an initial setback, have put in a stiff fight. Though please understand, Russian military is far, far stronger. But each day that the war progresses, the economic sanctions and the other international isolation starts biting Russia. Now, as far as China moving in is concerned, I think that is, to my mind, presumptuous, because China has maintained some sort of a stoic silence after initial support for Russia. And we have about 5,000 to 6,000 Chinese nationals still stranded in Ukraine. And there have been instances of the local Ukrainians giving them a little tough time because the China's support for Russia is well known. So this is as far as Chinese support for Russia is concerned. But as I said, the Russian economic situation will continue to worsen with each passing day because the sanctions are biting. Also, the Ukrainian military will get bolstered as far as hardware is concerned, with hardware coming in from different parts. So Russia's objective, which has been the major city of Kyiv, that is the capital, as well as Kharkiv, which is the second biggest city, they have not yet been able to capture. Though Russians have made significant progress from the Crimean front, from where one of their offensive has virtually taken over the complete coast of Ukraine along the Sea of Azov, all the way up to Donetsk region, which is the breakaway republic. So at some stages they have made progress, but their main thrusts have really not moved as forward as was expected. And this particular convoy, which you are talking of about stopping just outside Kyiv, we need to understand that armored columns, especially when there are big armored columns, they need refueling at regular intervals. And I think they carry with them their own fuel train, a convoy of fuel tankers. So I think they must have stopped somewhere to fuel up or something like that. Or they are probably waiting for the night or waiting for this particular second round of negotiations that takes place. Or this could only be a pressure tactics, because please understand, this armored column, if it goes into the built-up area, it is going to cause huge mayhem, but it will also be fairly vulnerable from attack from various buildings and built-up area on these armored vehicles.
Alok, stay with us. I just want to go over to Ashok 1 second for a very quick question. Ashok, I just want to ask you over here, there are reports that Russia actually sent a culture minister for the first round while Ukraine had sent its defense minister, and that in itself showed that Russia wasn't entirely serious about these talks. Is that, do you think, a correct read of the situation?
Absolutely. I think it's a correct read, and basically it might also have been that Russia was buying time. And because it had known that it's attacking units around Kyiv, because that is really the cherry on the pudding. That's the most important, most significant prize that Russia would be looking at to subdue and to get control over. Because in addition to everything else, it's very symbolic, and also the fact that so far at this moment, President Zelensky's administration is running from Kyiv, and if Russia is able to get control over Kyiv, then it would be a huge demoralization as far as the Ukrainian forces in other parts of the country, and also the Ukrainian people are concerned, who have given such a stiff resistance. So we'll have to see what happens in the second round. But I was quite amused to find that the Ukrainian delegation was a strong delegation headed by the defense minister. And there were commentators from Russia who were saying that President Zelensky is not coming in person. That means he is not serious about these talks. Meaning from Russia, it is the culture minister coming, and they think that is the right level to send. And here they would expect President Zelensky to be in attendance in person, so to say. So we'll have to see how the second round goes, but I fully concur with Alok what he says, that the first round was not expected to yield any results. Both of them were expected to make their démarches and put forward their highest ambitions as to what they wanted to achieve. We saw what Ukraine said, but now I think hopefully in the second round we will have some more substantive talks. On the other part, just last part on the, that they are waiting, what Alok said, that the convoy might be waiting for the second round. I think that if it was the second round, they would have used a little bit of force so that to send the message to Ukraine, to the Ukraine negotiators, that we are here, we are serious, so that they bring down their level of ambition as to what they can achieve through these discussions.
Mr. Sajjanar, I'm actually going to come to you in a little while, and Mr. Bansal, to understand, when you're talking about that level, what they can negotiate in those negotiations, both countries, I want to come to you to understand more of what's on the negotiating board in a little bit. But right now, stay with us. I'm actually going to take our audiences through something a little different, a little bit more information here. Ukraine's foreign minister has appealed to both India and China to leverage their positions and convince Russia to put an end to the military assaults. Take a look at what he had to say.
Problem is that many countries, they suffer, their nationals living, studying in Ukraine, they suffer because of the Russian aggression. And unfortunately, they also get killed by Russian shells and bullets. So I appealed to the Chinese foreign minister and also to the Indian foreign minister to take advantage of their leverage on Putin, of their relations with Russia, and urge Putin to stop this war immediately.
Только что по телеге Киев.
Students and professionals who continue to be stuck in Ukraine. I, Maha Siddiqui, will be joining you from Poland with all the details of how this massive exercise is being conducted on the Polish border, considering that Poland is overwhelmed with the number of Ukrainian refugees coming in at the moment. Coupled with that, the others, like Indian students, also making their way back to India via Poland.
Have two little children, and he had walked them all the way up to try to get them out. We met a family from Afghanistan. I mean, just think about that. They had fled Afghanistan. They came here. They have a 5-day-old baby. They just made it across only to be told because the baby doesn't have a birth certificate, they will not be able to cross. What everyone here will tell you, though, is that this system needs to be addressed. It needs to be quicker. It needs to be faster. These people have all suffered so much. They really cannot psychologically go through anymore.
So the president of the European Commission actually said just a couple days ago, we believe that Ukraine is one of us. We want them to join the European Union. However, it is not something that can happen overnight. It's a very complex process. It has to do with market integration. There are a number of steps, including democracy reform and anti-corruption efforts that would have to take place first. And of course, there's a war going on now in Ukraine, and there are separatist regions that have broken away from Ukraine and are now supported by Russia. So there are a number of obstacles here. President Zelenskyy did sign a formal application earlier this week for EU membership and has been pushing that a lot in recent days because, of course, he believes that it will give his country certain security guarantees, move him closer to the West, and show Russia that Ukraine is a European state that has the support of the entire European Union and the West. But this is not something that is going to happen quickly, even for a country that is not currently at war. It is a complex process. So they are reviewing that application for expedited candidacy for Ukraine, but it remains to be seen how and when and even if that's ever going to happen.
You can hear behind me now, the air raid sirens are starting up once again. We've already heard them a couple of times today. And the fear, as Volodymyr Zelenskyy put it in an address today to the people of Ukraine, is that the real focus now is on Ukraine's two main cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv. And he said, Kyiv and Kharkiv are the most important targets for Russia. Terror is meant to break us, to break our resistance. And he went on to say that Kyiv is special. This is the heart of the country, and it must keep beating. Now, for now, there hasn't been a blanket curfew put in place. People are still able to go out, but they're only really going out, Brianna and John, to try to buy supplies, to try to get groceries, batteries, things of this nature, because as we see this massive column of Russian armory and hardware bearing down on the capital, the very real fear is that this city will soon be completely encircled and that it will be extremely difficult to move supplies, to move food, to move humanitarian assistance in and out. And one more thing I want to mention, because it also sent a shiver down my spine, the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu accusing the Ukrainian military once again today of using civilian infrastructure as a shield for military hardware. This is the kind of propaganda we have heard from the Russians many times before, and unfortunately, it is usually a precursor to attacking or hitting civilian targets under the guise that they're being used to protect military hardware.
As you can imagine, in fact, all of these stories are absolutely heartbreaking. And among these horrendous stories of fear and of bombs falling, you also have a segment of the population that was living in Ukraine who are students, who are foreign nationals, and they have been going through
Welcome back. You're watching the morning news here at CNN News 18. 7 days into Russia's invasion of Ukraine and India's worst fears came true yesterday. A 21-year-old Indian medical student in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, that's near the Russian border, he was killed on Tuesday, marking the country's first casualty in the war. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the legion of leaders who offered condolences to the bereaved family of the 21-year-old. A video during the student's last moments revealed that he had stepped out from his bunker to purchase food, because there's obviously been incredible food shortages across the entire city. This is when shelling from Russian missiles actually began. Now, the Indian government has reiterated India's demand for the safe passage of Indian nationals, but you'll remember that more than 10,000 Indian nationals remain very much stuck in Ukraine while Operation Ganga, as it's being called, is underway.
के लोकप्रिय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के आदेश के अनुसार हम सब यहाँ पर उपस्थित हैं आपका अभिनंदन करने के लिए। और मैं आपसे ये बात भी साझा कर दूं कि प्रधानमंत्री निरंतर चिंता भी कर रहे हैं, एक एक मिनट की जानकारी भी प्राप्त कर रहे हैं, प्रत्येक सूचना उन तक पहुंच रही है, स्वयं वो स्थिति का आकलन करके हमारा मार्गदर्शन भी कर रहे हैं और ये उन्हीं की व्यवस्था के अनुसार सारी कार्रवाई हो रही है और वो सुनिश्चित कर रहे हैं कि एक व्यवस्था के अधीन एक एक करके ये फ्लाइट्स यहाँ पर आएँ और आपके लिए अपने घर तक पहुँचने तक की व्यवस्था की जाए। अब जब यहाँ से हम निकलेंगे बच्चों, तो नीचे हमारे हेल्प डेस्क बने होंगे स्टेट वाइज, वहाँ हम जाएंगे। उसके बाद रिफ्रेशमेंट, जलपान और फ्रेश होने के बाद अपने अपने स्थान, अपने अपने शहर, नगर, जो भी नेटिव प्लेस है, उसके जाने की यात्रा की व्यवस्था की जाएगी। तो धीरे धीरे हम यहाँ से निकलेंगे। उससे पहले आप सबके साहस के लिए, हिम्मत के लिए हम सब मिलकर के ताली बजाएंगे, ठीक है?
My colleague Anshul is with us live. He's actually with us from the IGI, the Indira Gandhi International Airport, as we speak right now. It's 8:28 in the morning. Anshul, I'm given to learn that another flight has just landed in the country. Tell us, is this the 9th flight? Is this the 10th flight that's come in so far? And where does the total number stand in terms of Indian students who've returned so far?
So yes, this is the 10th flight that has landed in India, and as I just try and move out of the frame and try and show the kind of arrangements, the family members of the students who will be coming in today are already very excited and waiting for their kids to come out finally. Remember, this flight was supposed to come at 7:20 but got delayed and has landed at around 8:10. Today is a big day in India's effort to take out its citizens from Ukraine. Today itself, more than around 6 flights will land in the national capital itself, and more than 1,300 students are expected to come to the national capital from Ukraine. So yes, a big day in India's effort. Not only this, over the next few days, we are going to see more than 28 flights. Over the next 3 days, we are going to see 28 flights coming to India with the students who are stuck in Ukraine. Also, the massive C-17 has also reached Poland and will be repatriating students from there. So yes, a big day and a big effort by the Indian government can be seen over here. More than 1,300 students are going to land in the national capital today. And yes, I'll just try and get in a word from the family members over here who have come here to receive them. आपके बच्चे आ रहे हैं यूक्रेन से आ रहे हैं, कहाँ से आ रहे हैं?
यूक्रेन से उजोड़ से आ रहे हैं और अभी लैंड करी है फ्लाइट और इतनी नाजुक स्थिति में वहाँ पर रहना और भारत के यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री की देन है कि जो सभी बच्चों को सुरक्षित लाने का उन्होंने काम
किया। बात हुई आपके बच्चों से बात हो पाई?
हाँ, अभी सुबह तक भी बात होती रही है और ठीक ठाक है और अभी लैंड करी है फ्लाइट, अभी निकलने वाले हैं।
कैसा महसूस कर रहे हैं? थोड़ा कितना सुकून मिला है पिछले 2-3 दिनों?
बढ़िया फील कर रहे हैं, लेकिन जब तक वहाँ था तब तक हमारे दिलों की मतलब जान निकली पड़ी थी, खाना पीना हराम था, लेकिन एक तरफ विश्वास था कि हमारे यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री भारत देश के इतने चीजों को लेकर के चल रहे हैं और हमारे बच्चों को भी सुरक्षित लेकर आएंगे। सो उन्होंने वो करके दिखाया है।
So that's the sense of gratitude and that's the sense of relief that people and the parents who have come here to receive their kids are feeling right now. So yes, a big day for India. More than 1,300 students will be coming here over the next few hours at around till around 11 p.m. tonight. The flights will keep on coming in and more than 1,300 students will land in the national capital safely from Ukraine.
Anshul, a quick follow-up question. Could you remind our audiences of the total number of the Indian community that was present in Ukraine before this crisis took place, just so we can have an estimation of what remains ahead for the Indian government?
So yes, the number told to us by sources is that around 20,000 students were stuck in Ukraine. So yes, it should take around 80 flights because on an average around 250 students come in a flight. So it should take around 80 flights from there to India to repatriate all the students who have been stuck there. But yes, the kind of effort that we have been seeing over today itself, 6 flights, and over the next 3 days more than 28 flights will be coming to India. So yes, India has definitely stepped up its pace, and the kind of diplomacy that we are seeing, that India is also in talks with Russia to take out students from the eastern border through Russia. So yes, we can expect that over the next week and a half or maybe 2 weeks, India will be able to take out all its citizens from Ukraine.
Anshul, thank you for bringing us that update. That's my colleague Anshul Singh with us live from IGI. As he was just pointing out, another flight has just landed, bringing Indian students back from Ukraine. Now, I'm going to go back to our two guests who've been with us through the show already. We have Alok Bansal, he's the director of the India Foundation, and Ashok Sajanar. He's with us. He's, of course, a former diplomat. Mr. Sajanar, I want to come over next to you. I want to touch on a question that, of course, has been rife on social media. So, you know, those who've been following the story for a while know that the Indian government had put out several warnings before the Ukraine crisis had started, asking its residents to return. Still, of course, there are questions about whether or not there was a mismanagement of the situation. I want to understand from you, in diplomatic circles, is it being thought that India should have raised the alarm in a larger way, or was there not more that could have been done there?
I think India has acted and moved in a very well thought out, very calibrated manner, very systematic manner. And, you know, as the threat had increased, India has been issuing advisories, and I'm sure on your channel also you would have shown that, you know, there were other considerations also as far as the students were concerned, because particularly the students who were in the west of the country, west of Ukraine, they said everything is going on so normal, everything is fine, there is no problem, so I'm sure nothing is going to happen there. That is as far as the western part of the country is concerned. As far as east is concerned, you know, Kharkiv, we see that there is so much of fighting, so much of bombing, shelling going on. Some of the other places, Mariupol, Poltava, Odessa, etc. I think there also no one really expected that there would be this sort of full-scale invasion coming in from Russia. That having been said, I think the advisories were put in. Many people left, whether it is students or some of the other nationals, they left. There was a chartered flight that was put in place on the 22nd of February. Another flight was going in on the 24th of February, you would recall, when it turned back midway. But I think our approach has been very methodical, very systematic. Advisories by the nature are not mandatory. Advisories are basically to caution and to forewarn the people and give them suggestions and recommendations as to what they should do. But after this, the attack took place and the Indian government has come into full steam, Prime Minister has taken this aspect hands-on, and we've seen how many of the Cabinet Committee on Security meetings have been chaired by the Prime Minister. I think 2 meetings every day, hands-on, and he himself has spoken to first on the 24th to the Russian President, where he also urged that safety and repatriation of Indian students is the topmost priority. On the 26th, he spoke to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. There also he mentioned about this. And then subsequently, he's spoken to the Prime Ministers of Romania, of Hungary, and
Mr. Sajanhar, can I just ask you a quick follow-up question right there, though? Yes. Can a country, legally speaking, to our audiences that don't know, to me that doesn't know all the regulations around this, can a country make it mandatory for its citizens to need to leave, and could that perhaps have happened or no?
I think it would be under very extreme circumstances that it would make the citizens, make it mandatory for the citizens to leave. I think normally it is, even now it is, there are people who might be doing business, who might be in certain parts of the country which is, far away from the war zones, because we've seen that the war takes place in the south of the country, in the east of the country, and in the central part, that is Kyiv. The western part of the country is still comparatively untouched and calmer than what is there in the rest of the country. So those people might justifiably feel that we don't really need to go out. This is not the epicenter of the conflict. You would recall that even when the Americans were evacuating their people from Afghanistan, there were so many Americans who didn't want to come out, and there was nothing that the American government was also able to do. So you might issue advisories, you might issue these recommendations to your people, but ultimately it is, and the people also will examine the gravity of the situation, and they will take their decisions accordingly. But making it mandatory, that could be done under extreme circumstances, and some of them might still decide to stay back and not follow those advice or those
orders,
guidelines. Yes.
All right, I'm actually going to go over now to Alok. Alok, I want to ask you more of a forward-facing question now. Obviously, we've got, as we've been talking about, the second round of talks that are about to happen. Now, you and me, all three of us, we were discussing a little while ago about how the Russians, by perhaps sending their cultural minister, weren't sending the strongest message about their seriousness about the talks. But you were also pointing out that since that was a first talk, it wasn't entirely surprising. So I do want to ask you, going into the second round, do you think that we can expect a change of attitude when it comes to the Russian side?
See, what I understand is that the Russians have insisted on permanent retention of Crimea, that is, Ukraine gives up its rights on Crimea and demilitarizes. Now, Crimea is as good as gone, I think, as far as Ukraine is concerned, and I think there are some historical reasons on which I don't think so it will be feasible psychologically for Ukraine to accept Crimea as Russian territory. But I feel Russia could get a face-saving mechanism under which Crimea is retained with Russia, and a certain amount of autonomy is granted to Donbas region, that is the two provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. That would be, I think, what Russia would be looking for, and then they could probably look for, this is just my loud thinking, I would put it, because now to Putin, for Putin to stop offensive or to pull back forces, he would need a very, very strong face-saving mechanism, because his own country, his standing will take a severe beating, as well as his international standing. So let's see how it goes the second round, because it is directly dependent on how difficult life becomes for Russia and its citizens under the international financial sanctions, and how strong is the international opposition as far as Russian offensive is concerned. And to that extent, I have no doubts that China and India will play a major role, because these are the two countries which have been maintaining a neutral stance till now.
All right, Mr. Bansal, Mr. Sajanhar, thank you so much for joining us here at CNN News 18 with that coverage of the story. Remember, the story in the Ukraine remains so important because it's the largest invasion on a European country since World War II. Incredibly important. We're bringing you all the updates. Right now, it's time for a short break. More news and updates for you on the other side. Do stay with us.
How can I
We've got to be mindful of the driver as well, okay? Let's move down this way against the wall. I'm down.
I need to check
Keep down, keep down, keep down.
I need you to check IFB.
It's okay, it's okay.
Russian column that has come down here has been absolutely hammered.
How did you learn how to make Molotov cocktails?
There's actually a massive column of Russian armored vehicles that are sort of going past us right now as we speak. I'm going to pan to them for a second.
There's an unbelievable horde of humanity here, and I will say this is the most diverse group of people that we have seen since we came into this country.